want to talk about connection and community and how relationships lead to return on investment, because let me see if I can back up here so I can see you guys a little bit better. Okay, just a real quick story. I'm wearing a bow tie. You see Jeremy wearing a bow tie. I want to let you know that we did talk about this before we came here, because yesterday we were at an event together, and I told my bow tie story, which is dating back to 1988, and Donnie Deutsch. Anybody ever hear of Donnie? Well, I used to hang out with Donnie before he was Donnie, when he was David Deutsch's son. Anybody know that Deutsch used to be called David Deutsch and Associates? And I'm hanging out with him all summer, basically getting drunk and falling asleep on front lawns. And finally, we're back in the city after Labor Day, and 3 times I see Donnie, and this is back in the day when everyone wore suits and ties. Xenia suits, suited up. 3rd time we're out, I'm like, Donnie, what's the deal with the bow ties? Every time I'm with him, he's wearing a bow tie. And he looks at me, very conspiratorial, and says, come over here on the side, come over here. He goes, chicks dig bow ties. Okay? And by the way, I took this very seriously. I was at Paul Stewart the next day. I bought 15 bow ties and went an entire year wearing bow ties. And needless to say, I don't think it had anything to do with the fact that I was 31 and living in New York City. I had one of the best years ever. But the real key that Donnie taught me was, you have to let them open the bow tie, because they have to get really close to do it. And then they see that, they want to know whether it's real. And once they see that, you've won. Jeremy was in the audience, heard the story,
tell him how that backfired.
Comes back from lunch with 2 bow ties. One for him and one for me. So this is about, we like to liken this to building connection. This is how you build community. And you might say, well, that's just me and Jeremy. But the way this scales is, I immediately sent out a photo of that bow tie. I syndicated it on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and there's at least 20 or 25 people that responded to that, and then went on to connect, some of them went on to connect with Jeremy. So this is how something spreads with connection and community. And
I think the core of this here is that relationships are based on bow ties, just in case you're wondering what to take away from that.
You need to tell you how that backfired on me this morning as well.
Excuse me?
How the bow tie backfired on me this morning.
Oh, well, why don't you tell the story? Because Jeremy did attract a woman this morning. True story.
So I'm walking like 10 blocks to come down, and there's a homeless lady at the side of the road, and she's got a little cup and a shopping trolley, and she gets up and strokes my arm. She's like, hey baby, how you doing?
I told you it worked.
She follows me like 5 blocks with her shopping trolley. I thought she was gonna come here, and she's looking at my bow tie, trying to grab it and undo it. It's like, that's not.
By the way, let's give a heads up right now. We are going overtime. 15 minutes is just not gonna cut it.
We got 10 minutes, let's do this.
So we've got some great brands here, and what we want to really talk about is some of the challenges you guys are having with how do you connect social to ROI, and how do you justify the fact that relationships build connection, build community, and in the end have results on the bottom line. Because a lot of you guys hear me talk about return on relationship, and I hear people misquoting me thinking that it's ROR versus ROI. It's not. It's that relationships enhance ROI. They add to ROI, and in the end, they're going to affect your bottom line. So why don't we talk a little bit about some of the things Adobe's doing?
So like we had this chat. I got into trouble actually. I'll mention the thing with the ROR thing. Social Media Week. There was the head of strategy for a phenomenally big brand that I called out because he said you shouldn't measure ROI. It's impossible to measure it in social. Everything should be ROR. He took what you said completely out of context, right? And it was the whole kind of Gary Vaynerchuk, how'd you put a value on a relationship? What's the ROI of your mom? What's the ROI of your dog? The thing with Adobe is that, and we won't do the sales, we've got a clinic at the back. If you guys want to talk ROI metrics, we can do all that stuff later on, but you can absolutely measure that. Like Dell are doing an incredible job at putting a value on a relationship, on a comment, on a Facebook page. You can absolutely track every single piece of that. But you need to have the context to understand the piece that goes before that.
You have to understand how it affects things, right? Like share of voice.
Exactly.
Most companies will have a handle on the fact that as their share of voice goes up, as their net promoter score goes up, so do other things follow. So maybe one of you guys could talk about how you see that.
You mentioned share of voice and NPS, and one of the things that we had noticed at Dell is that we have a way to we have a predictive model that tells us what NPS actually does. We can look at social media and tell you where our NPS score is going to be, and it's directly related to the conversations and the relationships that we're creating in social. And we can see that relationships drive NPS based upon the quality of the relationship, the quality of the content.
Does everyone in the room, by the way, know what NPS is? I'm not trying to embarrass anyone. Are you all aware of what NPS is, yeah?
My apologies. Okay. My apologies. Net promoter score. So the Net Promoter Score is basically a one-question survey that says, would you recommend this to a friend, this company to a friend? And it basically is supposed to tell you what the brand health is and how well you've done with that individual. And what we've done is we've created something called Social Net Advocacy Score. We have a Social Net Advocacy Pulse, which is an algorithm, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but it's an algorithm that actually monitors in real time the social conversations about Dell, looking at the relationships, the connections, and that algorithm actually gives us a score, and monitoring that score in real time will actually tell us what the next NPS score is going to be.
And isn't Adobe looking at lifetime value of a customer and how this is affected by the conversation that's going on and the amount of mentions you're getting, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
We're done.
The reason it's
A little
important,
color,
and
please.
this is just for context, right? Because everything that we do at Adobe is based around ROI. We've got this tool that we've spent billions of dollars building. We believe it's about a year ahead of anything else in the market, but it focuses on ROI. And that's cool if you're an e-commerce brand. We work with a lot of the biggest e-commerce brands in the world. And that's great when you can do a conversion thing. Something happens in social. People do all sorts of things online, offline. They go in forums, and they go and buy something. And you can track that all the way back. So you can look at the value of a fan. Now, what happens if you're Heineken or if you're Budweiser and you're going to build a social community?
Budweiser? Budweiser?
Budweiser.
Okay.
Thanks. And you can't track that sale, so that's where NPS comes in. So it's how likely on a scale of 1 to 10 would you be to recommend Budweiser to your friend?
Exactly.
As a result, say, of liking their Facebook page.
Exactly.
So what we're seeing at Adobe as a trend for the next 18 months is that whilst everybody's been obsessed with ROI, we believe that over the next 18 months, everyone's going to start to become obsessed with NPS because they've got these huge communities and they don't know what they're worth.
And community is an important word because I hear the word network being thrown around a lot, and it's a word that to me doesn't really show the value of what social's about. To me, a network is just a series of nodes, whereas community is people that support each other and support the brand. And I think another point that we need to get into is how that leads into the customers. Into the employees. To the employees.
Employees. Well, that's a great thing. Thank you. That's where I wanted to go.
And the value of the employees and what they can add to a brand. Just one quick thing, because it's a coincidence that I'm here with Jeremy, because one of the stories I like to tell is the way Adobe leverages their employees to scale their ability to comply and to speak on social media. So I'm a divorced dad. And my daughters are teenage daughters, and I talk a lot about how I look for moments of how to connect with them. And I liken that to connecting with a consumer. Because here we are as parents saying, listen to us, we know best, just like we are to consumers who are telling us we don't want to hear, just like our daughters are putting up that hand going, Dad, I don't want to know about this. But when do they absolutely listen to us? When they want money, when they want something. So my daughter calls me up at 16 and says she wants Photoshop. And she knows she's going to have to give me a good reason because, as we all know, it ain't cheap, right? So she says to me, Dad, I really want it, but then the next words out of her mouth, being a divorced dad, is, Mom says you're going to get it from a pirated site because you're one of those internet guys. But I want the real one. So can I come over and we can do it together? So I said, sure. And has anybody here ever tried to download Adobe? Sorry about this. But absolutely impossible, okay? Doesn't happen. Clock's ticking, Mom's texting saying, when are you going to come home? It's not really your night with Dad. I'm calling customer service and I'm getting the classic, sorry, it's after 6 o'clock, we're not here. So I tweet out saying, Adobe having all these problems downloading Photoshop, can anybody help? And I'm actually expecting one of you guys to jump in and tell me what to do. Within 10 minutes, I got 7 responses from 7 different employees from different parts of the globe in all different job functions from Adobe, simply saying, what can we do to help? Within a couple of minutes, I was now narrowed to speaking to one person because they were paying attention, and then they set up a time when I'd have my daughter's computer when they could walk me through downloading this at another time. And this is how you empowering your employees, and not only can they help you scale relationships and connection, but they're going to be your best advocates.
Absolutely, and the fact is that that's a reactive way, and you can also use proactive ways using your employees as well. And one of the things that we discovered at Dell is that our employees and their relationships actually are better at creating relationships than our brand sites. We find that because the organic development of relationships through our employees occur naturally, it gives them the ability to share links. And those links are clicked on 3 times as often as our business links because those links have personal
That's an
connections
amazing statistic.
to it.
3
Well,
times?
This is I'll validate exactly how close it is to 3, but it's damn near 3 times as often their links are clicked on than business links. And the thing is that it means that you're creating context and relevancy. I heard earlier about publishing content and how important content is. Well, content without relevancy and content without relationships will not go anywhere. It ends up becoming spam. We know we invest in content, and the fact is that content without the subsequent relationship does not have anywhere near the amount of benefit to a company than the relationship.
Content's the starting
and tell
point.
everybody the kind of employees that you're looking to recruit, what you were just saying
Well,
backstage.
so that is something, we've now certified more than 9,000 employees at Dell to actually engage in social media on behalf of Dell, but we recognize that there's a certain tier of employees that are more important than just the general one. And the one that we primarily look for are people who can bring value add to relationships. Those are our subject matter experts. Those are the people who are most valued in social media, and those are the ones that we're focusing on.
Jeremy, I know you had something to add.
No, so you were mentioning as well that you're looking to recruit sociologists that understand
So this
customer
is something else.
behavior.
This is back about.
Because I want to talk about, I'm going to...
Please, I'll feed you into that. So about 5 years ago, when we were looking at community, what we recognize is that social behavior doesn't vary between offline and online, and digital social behavior is impacted by the same impetus that sociologists have recognized throughout all of human community.
So let me read this thing. This is one of the things I love most about Brian. There was something that he threw out, I think it's a couple of months old. He was saying that social media's got more to do with sociology and psychology than technology. Now, obviously, I work for a big technology company, but we started off this thing with saying this is about ROR. This is about looking at relationships first and how. So let me read this thing to you. This is a book that I'm covering at the moment. It's a guy called Will Sprott. It's a really short paragraph. Social psychology today differs from the way we used to do social. We need to gain scientific evidence based upon what our audience is saying, and we need to be concerned about how both small groups and complex organizations behave as a society. We must think of groups of dynamic entities, not as mere collections of people haphazardly thrown together, and we must understand their purpose and how it varies from situation to situation. Now, what's fascinating about that is that this book was written in 1958. This, like Will Sprott, is like the Brian Solis of his day. This is like the original social book. I got it as a present for Brian. And I think the problem is that 58 years later, we're still struggling with the same stuff.
You know, I think the problem is a little bit different. I think it's that we need to go back to some of this advice from yesteryear, from the times when people knew you had to connect with people, that someone was not going to come back into your store if you didn't treat them the right way when they came in.
But how do you scale that when you've got 1 million, 10 million,
You
20
scale
million?
that by getting your employees involved.
You know, for me, here's the tip I like to give everybody. The best social media book ever written. It wasn't written by Brian. It wasn't written by me. It was written by a guy named Dale Carnegie in 1936. And if you guys have not read the book, get it tomorrow. How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's the best social media book ever written. It's more relevant today than it was then because of the way relationships scale. Dale Carnegie talks about calling people by name. You guys are out there with your brands, even with your personal Twitter accounts, and you're barely paying attention to people. You're clicking a button and you think it's a friend. That's not a friend. That's what my daughters do and call it a friend. A friend is when you look people in the eye digitally, the same way you would when you're in a meeting with them. You find out what their name is, you call them by it, you see where they live. How many people in this room have brands that have anybody in your organization that bother going to the Facebook pages of the people who are your fans? Do you go and look at them? Do you read what they're interested in? Or do you just wait for them to come and comment on your page? It's a total disconnect, and it's incredibly backwards. And I think we have to take the advice of some of these guys.
Agree completely. That's exactly right. Social behavior isn't changing just because there's technology as an intermediary. We still value the same things. We still value meaning as a core reason why we have relationship. And if we don't base value and meaning in order to drive long-term relationships in social, you're losing a huge opportunity.
And Jeremy, maybe you can make a comment about this. We were discussing the fact that, something that I talk about, that social is not digital, people. Okay? You think it's digital because it lives on digital platforms. You forget about that. It's not digital.
We're being played
and
off.
it can't be measured the same way. You've got to think of it as social. Start being social. You know what doesn't work for a social media strategy, people? Not being social. You got something to comment about that? Just ignore the music. It's no worse
Just to
than the
finish,
noise.
like my one piece of advice, we talk about ROI and NPS. My one piece of advice to you guys would be to find out what your number is. It's like one of my favorite quotes is from Winston Churchill, right? The only statistics you can trust are the ones you falsified yourself. You've got social companies saying 82% of sales come from Twitter. You've got Monetate EQ report. 1.5% of global e-commerce sales come from social. And there's numbers everywhere that are just thrown around that you can't believe because you don't understand context, the data, and the methodology. So kind of my advice to you would be to find out what that number is, how much of your sales has come from social. We did this at Adobe. It's absolutely possible to do. We bridged it between NPS and ROI, and we found that anyone that goes to adobe.com via our social channels spend twice as much, they're 40% more likely to return, and 14% of all our creative sales come from Twitter. And it's like, it's possible to find out what those numbers are to justify it in the boardroom.
You have to know what it is for your company.
Exactly.
You got a takeaway for us?
Just real briefly, relationships drive business. Meaningful relationships drive more business. Thank you for your time.